The courtroom felt unusually cold, even for a late October morning in downtown Denver. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, but it did little to warm the tension that hung like a heavy fog. Every chair was filled. Lawyers, court staff, reporters, and curious onlookers squeezed into the narrow gallery seats, some perched on the edge of folding chairs, cameras pointed toward the witness stand. A few journalists whispered into phones, exchanging excited murmurs. A case like this, involving a toddler and a police K-9, was rare enough to warrant their attention, but nobody expected what would unfold next. 3-year-old Ellie Parker walked in, her tiny hand clinging to her mother, Rachel. Rachel's eyes were red-rimmed, a mixture of exhaustion and anxiety, as if she'd been carrying the weight of the world for years. Her other hand gripped the strap of Ellie's backpack, stuffed with toys and an almost invisible comfort blanket. Ellie's small legs carried her forward with an awkward determination, each step wobbling under the weight of the stuffed rabbit she carried like a shield. The rabbit's fur was worn, patches stitched unevenly, and one eye was missing. Yet to Ellie it was her talisman, her only anchor in the strange, intimidating world of polished wood, suits, and hushed whispers. The judge, a man in his late 50s with a graying beard and an air of cautious authority, looked down from his elevated bench. His gavel lay poised, but his gaze softened when he noticed Ellie's tiny figure approaching the witness stand. He had presided over countless cases, but a toddler facing a courtroom of professionals, including a massive police K-9, was unprecedented. The lawyers had briefed him on the basics. Ellie had been present during an incident where Titan, a Belgian Malinois trained for urban policing, had intervened during a high-stakes arrest. But the reports were clinical, missing the human layer, the fear, the trauma, and now, potentially, a revelation no one had anticipated. Titan sat near his handler, Officer Jim Harlan, a tall man with broad shoulders and a calm, commanding presence. The dog was a marvel of muscle and discipline, trained for protection, pursuit, and obedience. His coat shone like burnished copper in the sunlight filtering through the windows. Titan's eyes, dark and intelligent, followed Ellie as she walked past, ears twitching. He was alert, but the faintest ripple of tension ran along his spine. He sensed the energy, something out of the ordinary, a presence not explained by commands, schedules, or protocols. Ellie climbed onto the witness stand with a careful balance that made Rachel wince. She perched on the edge, her small feet swinging like pendulums, eyes fixed on Titan. No words came yet. She simply stared. The courtroom, which had been alive with quiet murmurs and camera clicks, fell into an almost unbearable silence. Lawyers glanced at each other, unsure whether to proceed. The prosecutor, Amanda Cross, a sharp woman in her 40s with a reputation for precision and control, leaned forward slightly, trying to mask her curiosity with professional detachment. She had handled high-profile cases before, but toddlers had a way of disarming authority that no law degree could prepare one for. Rachel crouched beside her daughter, whispering, "Be brave, baby. Just tell them what you remember." Ellie nodded slightly, but her attention never wavered from Titan. There was something profound in that gaze, a depth that belonged to someone much older than her age, as if she understood the dog's thoughts and fears better than anyone in the room. The journalist scribbled furiously, sensing that the first words from this child could be historic, while the jury, a diverse group of 12, leaned forward in their chairs, straining to see her expression. Titan's handler shifted slightly, ensuring the leash remained taut. "Easy, buddy," he murmured under his breath, his voice low but tense. Titan's muscles twitched, eyes locked on the little girl. He had been through countless exercises, training simulations, and high-pressure scenarios, but there was something about Ellie's presence that made him pause. He wasn't responding to a command, yet his body language suggested recognition, maybe even respect, for this tiny human who dared to face him so directly. Ellie lifted her stuffed rabbit a little higher, almost unconsciously. The court reporter paused her fingers over the keyboard, sensing that the words about to come could change the direction of the case. Rachel tried to steady her breathing, feeling a mixture of hope and fear. The tension was thick enough to cut through. It clung to every polished surface, every dark wooden panel, and every witness in the room. Then Ellie took a deep breath. It wasn't the sharp inhale of a child startled by a stranger. It was a deliberate, steadying inhale, the kind one might use before diving into cold water or standing in front of a crowd. Everyone noticed. Her tiny chest rose and fell, her small hands gripping the rabbit closer, yet her eyes never wavered from Titan. There was a bravery in that gaze that defied her age, something raw and unfiltered that made several jurors instinctively straighten in their seats. Something told them that whatever was about to happen, it would matter. Ellie's lips parted slightly, and she whispered a sound so soft that a few people doubted they heard it. Then, gathering courage, she pointed her small finger at Titan. It was the kind of precise gesture that only a child who had seen something profound could make. The entire courtroom froze, a collective intake of breath echoing through the tall chamber. Titan's ears twitched, his tail stiffened, and the dog let out a low, almost questioning rumble. The sound carried across the room, vibrating in the polished wooden floors and hitting the people in the gallery with an almost electric force. The rumble wasn't aggression, it was recognition, an acknowledgement. Gasps broke from the spectators. The prosecutor leaned forward, pen hovering over her notes. Officer Harlan tightened his grip on the leash, jaw clenched, muscles taut as steel cables. He whispered under his breath, "Focus, buddy, just focus." Titan's eyes never left Ellie, his body frozen in an alert stance, yet not threatening. He had been trained for obedience, but nothing in his years of experience could account for this unusual behavior. The judge cleared his throat, his voice calm but layered with tension. "Miss Parker," he said softly, "would you like to tell the court why you are pointing at Titan?" Ellie's small voice trembled as she replied, barely above a whisper, "He remembers." The words, so simple and yet so loaded, ricocheted across the room. Journalists' pens scratched frantically, recording history in real time. The jury blinked in disbelief. Titan's low rumble intensified slightly, as though he understood the weight of the statement. Officer Harlan froze, unsure whether to call it obedience, instinct, or something entirely unexplainable. Rachel's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. Realizing her daughter might be the only person in the courtroom capable of conveying the truth about that night. A silence fell, dense and suffocating. The courtroom felt smaller, the air heavier. Everyone was waiting, holding their breath, knowing that the next words could unravel the official record, redefine the case, or reveal a story no one was prepared to hear. Ellie's tiny frame seemed impossibly fragile amid the weight of all these adults, yet she stood, or rather perched, as the pivot of something monumental. The tension wasn't just legal, it was human, emotional, raw. People leaned in, some in disbelief, others in silent hope, all wondering what this 3-year-old could possibly know. And then she repeated it louder this time, "He remembers." The words echoed in the courtroom like a bell, vibrating against the high ceilings, reverberating through every chest. Titan's ears pricked further, his body quivering slightly in acknowledgement. Rachel's eyes welled with tears, a mixture of pride and fear. The prosecutor glanced at the defense table, a silent question passing between them. What did this child know that could change everything? The judge leaned forward, his gavel momentarily forgotten, sensing the gravity of what was unfolding. And as the whispers in the gallery rose, Ellie's finger remained firmly pointed, unshakable, at the police dog who had witnessed more than anyone had imagined. Gasps rippled across the courtroom as Ellie's tiny finger remained pointed at Titan. The murmurs of journalists, spectators, and even the jury created a low, tense hum that seemed to vibrate through the polished wooden floors. Titan, the Belgian Malinois, did not move away, nor did he growl. Instead, his dark, intelligent eyes seemed to pierce through the space between them, fixed unwaveringly on the child. His ears twitched, and a low rumble emanated from deep in his chest, a sound neither threatening nor casual but profoundly attentive. He was recognizing something no one else could see, something beyond commands or training. Rachel Parker instinctively reached for her daughter, worried that Ellie might become overwhelmed. "Honey," she whispered, her voice shaking, "don't be afraid." But Ellie did not look at her mother. She did not even glance at the judge or the row of attorneys. Her gaze was locked on Titan, unwavering, with a focus that made several jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats. Ellie's 3-year-old body held a stillness that contrasted sharply with the tension radiating from the adults around her. She seemed almost older, as if her small frame carried knowledge far beyond her years. The prosecutor, Amanda Cross, leaned slightly forward, eyes narrowing. She was a seasoned courtroom veteran, known for her sharp instincts and commanding presence, but now she found herself caught off guard. "Miss Parker," she said carefully, trying to maintain her professional composure, "can you tell us why you're pointing at the dog?" Her tone was gentle, almost coaxing. But beneath it lay the underlying tension. If this toddler knew something significant, it could upend months of police reports and witness statements. Cross had spent hours preparing, meticulously reviewing every document. And now, the center of her case, a toddler, was challenging the official narrative with a single pointed finger. Ellie's small lips trembled. For a moment she seemed to hesitate, as if weighing the enormity of the words she was about to speak. Her tiny hand did not falter, it remained raised steady. "He remembers," she whispered again, voice soft but clear. The courtroom went silent, every ear straining to catch the words. Titan's body stiffened. His low rumble grew slightly louder, almost as though he was agreeing. Officer Jim Harlan, Titan's handler, tightened his grip on the leash, a flicker of unease crossing his normally stoic face. He had worked with Titan for over 7 years, training the dog for everything from drug detection to suspect apprehension. He had never seen him respond like this to anyone, let alone a toddler. Titan wasn't reacting to commands. He wasn't acting on training. He was reacting to Ellie, as if she held the key to something he had never revealed to another human being. The defense attorney, Marcus Reynolds, leaned back in his chair, eyes widening slightly. He exchanged a glance with his client before murmuring under his breath, "What in the world?" Even the judge leaned forward, one hand pressed to his chin, trying to gauge what this child could possibly know. He had presided over thousands of cases, but the combination of a toddler, a police dog, and an apparently inexplicable bond was something he had never encountered. This was uncharted territory. Rachel's hands were shaking, her knuckles white against the polished wood of the witness stand. She whispered softly to Ellie, her voice a lifeline. "You're okay, baby. Just tell them what you saw." Ellie nodded once, her expression solemn. She was aware of the gravity of the room, the faces staring down at her, the silent cameras capturing her every gesture. Yet she did not flinch. She did not hesitate. It was as if she had known this moment would come and had prepared herself in ways no one could imagine. Ellie took a small, careful step toward Titan. The dog's gaze did not waver. He shifted slightly, but not away, only to better align his body with hers. A few jurors instinctively leaned back, sensing the intensity of the connection forming before their eyes. Titan was not acting on instinct alone. He was aware. He was responsive. He was listening. Amanda Cross cleared her throat, trying to regain control of the courtroom. "Miss Parker," she said softly, "do you remember the night in question? The night when Titan was called to protect your mother?" Ellie's head tilted slightly, her big eyes focusing on the dog as if recalling a memory only he and she could share. Her tiny hand clutched the rabbit tighter against her chest. She swallowed audibly, her lips moving as if forming words from a place far older than her years. Then, in a voice trembling but steady, she said, "He saved us." A collective intake of breath swept through the courtroom. "Saved us." The words echoed off the high ceilings, bouncing from the polished wood to the muted, hushed audience. Titan's low rumble deepened, a sound that resonated with an almost human emotion. Officer Harlan's hand twitched. He had trained Titan for countless scenarios, yet nothing in his experience could have prepared him for a dog reacting to a child with recognition and apparent memory of a traumatic event. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he studied Ellie's face. There was a clarity in her gaze that could not be dismissed. "Saved you, "How do you mean, Miss Parker?" His voice was gentle, encouraging, yet the weight of authority pressed into every word. Ellie's fingers clutched the rabbit more tightly. Her voice, small but resolute, replied, "He kept the scary man away from Mommy. He made it stop." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The jurors shifted in their seats, some exchanging incredulous glances, others whispering quietly to neighbors. Titan's ears twitched, and he let out a soft, almost mournful whine, a sound that made more than one heart constrict. The child's words seemed to echo in the room, layering reality with memory and emotion with the rawness of truth. Rachel reached down instinctively, smoothing Ellie's hair and whispering, "You're doing so good, sweetie." The reassurance barely masked the tremor in her voice. She had lived through that night over and over in her mind, reliving the fear, the chaos, and the helplessness. And now, in the center of a courtroom filled with strangers, her daughter was describing it with a clarity that pierced the sterile layers of legal procedure. Officer Harlan shifted uneasily. "Your Honor," he said, voice measured but laced with uncertainty. "Titan, he's a highly trained K-9. He responds to commands. He doesn't, well, he's not supposed to react like this without input." His gaze flicked at the dog, who now moved subtly closer to Ellie, lowering his massive head almost reverently. Titan's eyes never left her. Harlan's heart thudded in his chest. He had spent years trying to predict the dog's actions, and for the first time, he realized he was witnessing something he could not explain. Marcus Reynolds, the defense attorney, leaned forward, lowering his voice but speaking with audible fascination. "It appears the child recognizes something about the dog, something the dog recognizes in return. I'd suggest the court allow her to continue." The room hummed with tension. No one was quite sure what would happen next. A 3-year-old was asserting authority over the narrative, and a trained police dog was responding as if her words carried weight far beyond ordinary human comprehension. Ellie took a slow, careful step closer, placing the stuffed rabbit on the floor in front of Titan. The dog lowered his nose to sniff it, and the courtroom collectively held its breath. Titan's ears flattened slightly, and he let out a soft whine, the kind that suggested recognition, concern, and, almost uncomfortably, empathy. The jurors were captivated. Journalists scribbled furiously. The judge's hand hovered over the gavel, not out of authority, but almost as if he were waiting to see what miracle would unfold next. Ellie's eyes glistened with tears, but she did not look away. She whispered, so softly it could barely be heard over the sound of hushed breathing, "It's okay now. You don't have to be scared." Titan responded instantly, leaning his massive head into her small hand, as if accepting comfort from someone half his size. The sound of his whine carried through the courtroom, low and tremulous, an audible sign that he understood the weight of what had happened and was ready to acknowledge it fully. Every adult present was shaken. No one had ever seen a 3-year-old command such respect from a police K-9, nor did they understand the depth of their shared memory. The air hung thick with suspense, electric with the raw power of trust, fear, and recognition converging in one tiny girl and one extraordinary dog. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "Miss Parker, if you can, tell us more about what happened that night." Ellie nodded solemnly, gripping her rabbit tighter, preparing herself to articulate a memory that no one expected a child her age to hold, and a dog her age seemed determined to confirm. And with that, the courtroom leaned in as Ellie prepared to speak, the tension so palpable it could almost be touched, every heartbeat synchronized with the silent anticipation of what would be revealed next. Ellie's small shoulders trembled slightly, but her gaze never wavered from Titan. The courtroom, already tense, fell into an almost reverent silence. Every person present, lawyers, jurors, reporters, even the judge, seemed suspended in time, leaning forward as if the child's next words could alter the very laws of reality. Titan's ears were pricked, his body rigid, the soft whine that had escaped him earlier lingering like a heartbeat in the air. Officer Harlan gripped the leash tighter, his knuckles white, but he didn't command the dog. He seemed to understand, in a way no one else could, that Titan's response was instinctive, almost sacred. Rachel Parker's hands shook as she smoothed Ellie's hair, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie, just tell them." Ellie took a deep breath, clutching the worn rabbit tighter against her chest. Her tiny voice quivered as it emerged, barely audible at first. "He remembers." The words hung in the room, heavy with implication. Every head turned toward the dog, whose eyes, dark and intense, were locked on Ellie. Titan's low rumble resonated through the courtroom, vibrating against the polished wooden benches, creating an almost physical sensation of tension. Officer Harlan swallowed hard. He had worked with Titan for years, had trained him to respond to commands, to suppress instinct, to obey orders unquestioningly. But this was different. Titan's response was not learned, it was recognition. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, blinked rapidly as though trying to recalibrate her understanding of the situation. "Excuse me, Miss Parker," she asked, her tone a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "He remembers what?" Ellie's small hands tightened on the rabbit, knuckles white, but her gaze remained unwavering. She took another deep breath, drawing from a well of courage far beyond her years. "He remembers the scary man," she said softly, voice trembling but firm. The jurors gasped audibly. Titan's whine deepened into a low, almost mournful bark, the sound carrying an undeniable weight. The judge leaned forward, fingers clasped, eyes locked on Ellie. "Miss Parker, can you tell the court what happened that night?" Ellie nodded, as if mentally preparing herself to recount events that had haunted her and her mother for months. She knelt slightly on the witness stand, lowering herself to Titan's level, and whispered something only the dog could hear. Titan's ears twitched, his posture softened slightly, yet he remained focused, unblinking. The subtle shift was enough to make the courtroom collectively hold its breath. Ellie's mother whispered encouragement, a soft, steadying presence in the whirlwind of tension. "It's okay, baby, just tell them everything." Ellie clutched her rabbit tighter, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and began to describe the night in fragments only a 3-year-old could recall, yet articulated with remarkable clarity. "The lights were bright and loud, and the man he shouted at Mommy, I was scared." Each word seemed to travel through the room like a pulse, making hearts race and heads turn. Titan responded instantly, a low rumble confirming the child's memory, as if echoing the truth of what had happened. The defense attorney, Marcus Reynolds, leaned forward, whispering under his breath to his client, "You're seeing it too, right? The dog, he's responding." The client nodded, eyes wide. Across the room, Amanda Cross's pen hovered over her notes, hands shaking slightly. She had prepared for every conceivable witness testimony, every narrative twist, but she had not prepared for a toddler and a K-9 dog rewriting the story in real time. The room was taut with disbelief and anticipation. Ellie continued, each word sharper, more precise, cutting through the hushed murmurs. "He barked Mommy was in danger, but Titan, he didn't bite, he stood in front, he made it stop." The jurors shifted uneasily, some leaning forward, others whispering to neighbors. Titan's response escalated. He let out a soft bark, a deliberate, rhythmic sound, followed by another low rumble that seemed almost like acknowledgement. Officer Harlan exhaled slowly, realizing that the dog's behavior was not random. He had trained Titan for obedience, but this was instinct guided by memory, a protective memory shared only between the child and the dog. Rachel Parker felt her chest tighten, tears spilling over as she realized Ellie was recounting the night's events with a precision that defied her age. She had lived through those moments, terrified, powerless, but now her daughter was narrating it aloud, supported by Titan's undeniable response. The tension in the courtroom thickened as the room collectively absorbed the gravity of the testimony. The connection between a 3-year-old and a trained police dog, linked by a shared experience of trauma, was overwhelming in its intensity. The judge's voice broke the silence. "Officer Harlan, is the dog reacting to a command or—" His question trailed off as he struggled to articulate what everyone in the room was feeling but could not fully explain. Officer Harlan shook his head, eyes wide. "No, Your Honor. No command was given. He's responding to her." The words carried an almost reverential tone, acknowledging that the dog's behavior was something extraordinary. Titan, massive and disciplined, leaned slightly toward Ellie, his dark eyes reflecting recognition and understanding. Every subtle movement spoke volumes. Ellie's lips trembled as she whispered, "He's not scared anymore. I told him it's okay." Titan's head lowered, resting gently against her small hand. A soft whine escaped him, carrying a mixture of relief, recognition, and empathy. The jurors' collective breath caught in their throats. The courtroom, once a sterile space of rules and procedure, had transformed into a chamber of raw human emotion, memory, and connection. Even the reporters, trained to maintain objectivity, found themselves leaning forward, captivated. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, straightened in her chair, voice cautious but probing. "Miss Parker, do you remember what the man looked like? Can you tell the court?" Ellie's tiny lips pursed as if weighing the words. Her gaze shifted slightly, scanning the courtroom before returning to Titan, as if confirming that her recollection was shared and validated by the dog. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper but filled with clarity, she said, "He had angry eyes and he shouted." Titan's low bark cut through the room again, sharp and deliberate, punctuating her words. Every juror instinctively leaned in, straining to hear the nuances of this extraordinary communication. Rachel reached for Ellie's hand, squeezing it gently, but Ellie lifted her small fingers to touch Titan's collar. The dog leaned into the touch, massive head resting against the child's tiny hand, a gesture so protective and reverent it sent a shiver through the room. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, but no one dared interrupt. The narrative unfolding before them defied explanation. A child's memory validated by a police K-9, a witness protected and acknowledged by instinct and loyalty. Ellie's voice grew stronger, each word deliberate. "He was scary, but Titan, he knew. He made sure Mommy was safe. He remembers everything." The jurors exchanged glances, some incredulous, some moved to the edge of disbelief. Officer Harlan swallowed hard, feeling a mix of awe and unease. Titan's training had never accounted for this, a memory shared across species, communicated through instinct and recognition. The courtroom had transformed from a formal legal environment into a theater of emotional truth. The judge leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "Miss Parker, you're saying the dog remembers what happened that night and is protecting you and your mother?" Ellie nodded solemnly, her tiny fingers still clutching Titan's collar. The low rumble from the dog responded as if affirming the statement, the sound reverberating like a heartbeat across the room. Silence followed, heavy and charged, as every person in the courtroom processed the extraordinary scene. Rachel Parker's tears flowed freely now. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "I can't believe she's doing this, and he's listening." The power of that moment, her daughter's courage, Titan's instinctive loyalty, and the raw clarity of memory being shared in such an unexpected way, was overwhelming. The courtroom had become a living testament to trust, protection, and unspoken understanding, bridging the gap between a terrified child and a devoted police K-9. Ellie's tiny hands rested firmly on Titan's head as she whispered once more, "It's okay now, he's not scary anymore." Titan leaned into her touch, eyes softening, a low sigh escaping from his throat. The jurors shifted, some wiping tears from their eyes. The judge exhaled slowly, hand on the gavel, realizing that the case had just taken a turn beyond any procedural expectation. This was no longer just testimony. It was a revelation, a living memory embodied in a child and a dog. The tension did not ease. It deepened, building toward something inevitable. Every eye in the room was fixed on Ellie and Titan. The whispers of reporters ceased, replaced by the almost tangible weight of anticipation. The child and the dog shared a connection that no one could explain, yet everyone felt viscerally. Something profound was about to be revealed, and the room collectively held its breath for the words that would come next. And as Ellie's small voice trembled through the room, recounting fragments of the night with precision and clarity, Titan's low, reverent whine punctuated each sentence. It was as if the dog himself were narrating, confirming, and protecting the truth. Every adult present knew this. They were witnessing something extraordinary, something that transcended law, training, and expectation. and the courtroom waited, suspended, for the moment when the child would speak the words that would stop everyone cold. The courtroom was silent, but not in the typical sense. This was a silence that carried weight, a silence heavy with expectation, dread, and curiosity. Every pair of eyes followed Ellie Parker as she knelt slightly on the witness stand, lowering herself to Titan's level. The Belgian Malinois, trained to obey, protect, and react, leaned slightly forward, ears pricked, eyes unblinking, focused entirely on the tiny child before him. The subtle rumble that had accompanied his reactions until now deepened, vibrating through the polished wooden floors like the heartbeat of the room itself. Officer Harlan, Titan's handler, swallowed hard, realizing that this was no ordinary moment in training or testimony. Rachel Parker's hands trembled as she watched her daughter move with determination and caution. Her mother's instinct screamed that Ellie was about to bridge the impossible, between innocence and experience, between child and dog, between fear and understanding. Ellie placed her small rabbit gently on the floor, in front of Titan, almost ceremoniously. The stuffed toy, worn and patched, became an unspoken signal. This was no longer about witnesses, lawyers, or procedural formalities. It was about memory, instinct, and a bond that transcended words. The jurors, initially unsure how to react, leaned forward, their collective gaze riveted on the child and the dog. Some whispered softly to neighbors, unsure if what they were witnessing could even be described in legal terms. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicking, as if the act of documentation might somehow capture the gravity of the moment. The room seemed to shrink, compressing the tension into the small space between Ellie and Titan. Ellie reached out her small hand, touching the dog's collar. Titan tilted his massive head slightly, letting her hand rest against him. He did not move away. He did not react aggressively. He simply acknowledged her presence, a gesture of recognition so profound it made several jurors gasp. Officer Harlan's knuckles whitened as he gripped the leash, uncertainty flashing across his normally stoic face. Titan had been trained to obey commands, to remain disciplined under duress. Yet here, in the center of a courtroom, he responded to Ellie's touch, as if it carried a truth that superseded training. Ellie's voice trembled as she whispered, barely audible over the collective breathing in the room. "It's okay, you don't have to be scared." Titan's ears twitched. His low rumble grew deeper, almost a sigh of relief. The dog leaned into her touch, head resting gently against her tiny hand. The jurors, the judge, and the attorneys all watched, some with disbelief, some with tears forming in their eyes. A trained K9, a living instrument of law, was displaying emotions in response to a child's voice. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, straightened in her chair, her composed demeanor faltering. "Miss Parker," she said carefully, "can you tell the court what you are doing with the dog?" Ellie's big eyes, shining with unshed tears, met the adult's gaze. Her voice, small but firm, carried a clarity beyond comprehension. "I'm telling him it's okay, I'm helping him remember." The room collectively froze. Officer Harlan's grip on the leash loosened slightly, and Titan's massive frame seemed to exhale along with him. What was memory for a human? What was instinct for a dog? And how could a 3-year-old, trembling and vulnerable, act as the bridge between the two? The jurors, their professional detachment evaporating, leaned closer. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared, unable to comprehend the gravity of what they were witnessing. Ellie's fingers moved gently along Titan's collar. She leaned closer, whispering words so soft they were almost swallowed by the thick air. "You remembered, you were protecting us." Titan responded instantly, pressing his massive head into her hand, a sound of acknowledgement escaping from deep in his chest. The courtroom collectively shivered. This was no longer testimony. This was revelation. Rachel Parker's voice cracked as she whispered to her daughter, her own fear mixing with awe. "You're so brave, baby. Just tell them what happened." Ellie's lips parted slightly, and she took a steadying breath, preparing to articulate memories that had haunted her mother for months. The scary man, he shouted. He tried to hurt Mommy, but Titan, he stood in front. He wouldn't let him. The words, fragmented yet vivid, painted a scene in the minds of everyone present. The air seemed to thicken with tension, each listener imagining the chaos, the fear, the sheer vulnerability of that night. Titan's low rumble deepened, vibrating through the wooden benches and echoing in the high ceiling. Officer Harlan's eyes widened. He had never heard the dog make that sound in the presence of anyone, let alone a toddler. Every muscle in Titan's massive body was attuned to Ellie, responding to her narrative in a way that defied training manuals, police protocols, and every expectation the officer had. The dog was remembering, recognizing, and confirming in the only way he knew how, through instinct, loyalty, and emotion. The judge, now leaning forward, hand resting against his chin, spoke softly but with authority. "Miss Parker, are you saying the dog protected your mother, that he prevented something from happening?" Ellie nodded, small fingers gripping the rabbit tightly. Her voice, quivering but determined, answered, "He made it stop. He remembered everything." Titan's head tilted slightly, ears pricked, a soft whine escaping him. The sound punctuated the words, carrying the weight of undeniable truth. Amanda Cross, recovering her professional composure, tried to regain control. "Ellie, how do you know he remembers?" The courtroom collectively held its breath. Ellie's gaze remained fixed on Titan. She lowered her tiny voice further, so soft it barely rose above a whisper, "Because he's not scared anymore." The jurors' collective intake of breath was audible. A trained police dog, one whose instincts were honed for aggression and protection, was showing trust and relief in response to a 3-year-old child. It was unprecedented. Officer Harlan exhaled slowly, recognizing that Titan's reaction validated the child's memory and possibly her testimony. He had trained the dog for countless scenarios, but nothing in his experience explained this perfect synchronization between memory, instinct, and human courage. Rachel Parker felt tears spill down her cheeks. The weight of months of fear, helplessness, and uncertainty lifted slightly, replaced by awe. Her daughter, so small and fragile, was communicating truths the adults could not. She whispered softly, almost reverently, "You're amazing, baby, just keep going." Ellie nodded slightly, eyes glistening, and continued to narrate fragments of the night, each detail punctuated by Titan's reactions. The rumble, the whine, the careful, deliberate tilt of his massive head. Ellie's tiny body trembled, not from fear, but from the intensity of the moment. She took another breath, eyes wide and solemn, and whispered again, "He was scary, but Titan, he protected us." The dog leaned into her touch, as if acknowledging the enormity of her words. The jurors, the reporters, even the judge, felt the tension tighten and release, each subtle movement and sound drawing them deeper into a story that transcended law and procedure. The courtroom seemed suspended in time. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled, jurors whispered. Every person present felt the weight of an extraordinary bond, a child's memory validated by instinct, a dog's loyalty confirmed through subtle gestures, and a mother's relief anchored by the courage of her small daughter. Every word Ellie spoke, every whine Titan made, layered suspense, empathy, and emotion into the air. The sterile walls of the courtroom had transformed into a theater of raw, unfiltered human and animal connection. Then Ellie's gaze shifted slightly, scanning the courtroom before returning to Titan. Her small hands rested gently on his head, whispering words so soft they carried like a secret. "You remembered him, the one who scared Mommy, you knew to protect us." Titan's ears flattened slightly, his body tense but controlled, and he let out a long, low whine. The jurors shifted uncomfortably. Every subtle gesture communicated recognition, memory, and the acknowledgement of past events. The courtroom had been stopped cold by the unlikeliest of witnesses, a 3-year-old child and a police dog. Amanda Cross, attempting to regain control of the narrative, adjusted her notes, whispering to herself, This is impossible." The defense attorney leaned back, eyes wide, as his client whispered, "We're seeing something extraordinary, something no one can explain." The judge pressed a hand to his lips, exhaling slowly, understanding that the official record had just shifted irreversibly. The audience, whether in the room or through the lenses of reporters' cameras, could feel the suspense coil tighter, each word and gesture ratcheting tension to an almost unbearable pitch. Ellie's voice, though small, grew firmer. "Titan, he was brave, he saved us, and he remembers it all." Titan leaned into her hand, a soft whine punctuating the statement. The judge, the jurors, the attorneys, the spectators all remained frozen. The bond between the child and the dog had shifted the room's energy, creating a shared understanding that transcended the written records, reports, and testimonies that had been painstakingly prepared for months. Here, in this moment, instinct, courage, and memory had converged into something undeniable. And as Ellie whispered her final words for this moment, "It's okay now, we're safe," Titan exhaled a low, tremulous sigh. The courtroom felt suspended, caught between disbelief and awe, every heart synchronized with the silent, profound truth being revealed. A 3-year-old child, a trained police dog, and a bond so deep it left everyone questioning what they thought they knew about courage, memory, and protection. The courtroom remained silent, but the silence was thick with anticipation, a tension so dense it felt almost tangible. Everyone, jurors, lawyers, reporters, even the judge, watched as Ellie Parker, 3 years old and trembling, continued to kneel before Titan. The Belgian Malinois had shifted subtly, pressing his massive head gently against the child's tiny hand, a gesture of trust and recognition. The soft rumble from deep in Titan's chest carried through the room, vibrating in the polished wood floors, as though validating every word the child had spoken. Officer Harlan, the dog's handler, swallowed hard, sensing something profound unfolding, something that went far beyond training or protocol. Rachel Parker's heart pounded in her chest. She had lived with the fear of that night for months, replaying the moments over and over, flashing lights, shouting voices, chaos, and danger. Now her tiny daughter, perched on the witness stand with an unwavering gaze, was narrating events with startling clarity. And Titan, a creature trained to obey, was confirming her story in ways that defied logic. Rachel's hands trembled as she smoothed Ellie's hair. "You're so brave, baby," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just keep telling them." Ellie took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling, preparing to reveal the first details that could change everything. She leaned closer to Titan, whispering words too soft for anyone to hear. The dog responded instantly, a low whine, the sound filled with acknowledgement. The jurors leaned forward, straining to catch any audible clue. Titan's massive body shifted slightly, as if bracing for the retelling. The courtroom was suspended in a moment that felt both surreal and profoundly real, a meeting of courage, memory, and instinct. She tried to hurt Mommy," Ellie whispered, her voice quivering. Titan stiffened, ears pricked, eyes locking onto the tiny child with a recognition that made every adult in the room shiver. Officer Harlan's hands tightened on the leash, but he did not command the dog. He knew instinctively that Titan was not responding to training. It was memory, it was protection, it was acknowledgement. Every muscle in Titan's massive body was attuned to Ellie, reacting as if the child's words were a trigger for a memory too profound for commands to contain. The prosecutor, Amanda Cross, leaned forward, voice soft but probing. "Ellie, what do you mean? What happened?" Ellie's gaze remained fixed on Titan, her tiny hands clutching the worn rabbit tightly. The man, he shouted at Mommy. He got too close, but Titan stood in front. He made it stop," she said, each word deliberate as though reconstructing a memory frozen in time. The courtroom collectively exhaled, the reality of her statement sinking in. This was not hearsay. This was direct, living testimony, validated by the response of a trained police dog. Titan's low rumble deepened, resonating through the courtroom, a sound so primal it seemed to underscore the truth of Ellie's words. Officer Harlan swallowed again, realizing that the dog's behavior was confirming something beyond explanation. Titan had acted on instinct that night, not merely on commands, and Ellie's memory was accurate. The jurors shifted uneasily, absorbing the magnitude of the revelation. Every subtle gesture of the dog, leaning into the child, tilting his massive head, rumbling in acknowledgement, spoke volumes, affirming a story that had previously existed only in fragmented recollection. Rachel Parker's hands shook, She whispered softly to Ellie, "It's okay, sweetie. You're telling them the truth. Just keep going." Ellie nodded slightly, her big eyes brimming with tears, yet her resolve remained. She continued, each word precise, painting a picture vivid enough to penetrate the minds of everyone present. He barked, he growled, the scary man tried to reach Mommy, but Titan, he wouldn't let him. He stood there, and he didn't move until Mommy was safe. The jurors, previously skeptical, now exchanged looks of disbelief and awe. Titan, massive and disciplined, leaned slightly closer to Ellie, confirming her words with subtle but unmistakable gestures. Amanda Cross cleared her throat, trying to maintain professional composure, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her shock. "Miss Parker, are you saying the dog saved your mother?" Ellie nodded solemnly. Titan's low whine punctuated the confirmation, a sound that seemed to reverberate in every chest in the courtroom. Officer Harlan exhaled slowly, recognizing that what he was witnessing had never occurred in his 7 years of training Titan. The dog had acted not on commands, but on memory and instinct, on the protection of those he had bonded with under duress. Ellie's words, though simple, carried an impact that rippled through the courtroom. He remembered everything. He knew what to do. Her tiny fingers pressed gently against Titan's massive head. The dog responded with a subtle, almost imperceptible shift forward, ears pricked, muscles tensed but controlled. The jurors leaned closer, their disbelief giving way to awe. A 3-year-old child and a trained police dog had created a narrative that transcended the limits of official reports, witness statements, and even professional intuition. Rachel Parker wiped tears from her eyes, realizing that Ellie's courage had created a bridge between memory and instinct. The child had lived through trauma, yet here she was, articulating events with clarity and precision beyond her years. And Titan, massive, disciplined, and loyal, was validating every word. It was a living demonstration of protection, trust, and recognition, one that no adult testimony could match. The judge, fingers pressed together, exhaled slowly. "Ellie, can you tell the court if the dog did anything else that night?" Ellie's tiny hand rested firmly on Titan's collar. He stayed there, until the scary man left. "He didn't move, he watched over Mommy and me," she said, voice firm, each word layered with emotion. Titan leaned slightly forward, rumbling, as if affirming the child's memory. The courtroom was caught between disbelief and awe, unable to fully comprehend the interaction but profoundly moved by it. Officer Harlan's hands shook slightly on the leash. He had trained Titan to respond to commands, to obey protocols, but he had never accounted for this. A child's memory guiding the actions of a trained K9, validated by instinct and recognition. Every subtle gesture, every rumble, every tilt of the dog's head reinforced Ellie's narrative. The courtroom was suspended in a moment of extraordinary clarity and suspense. Ellie's small voice continued, recounting fragmented yet vivid memories. "He growled, he barked, but he never hurt anyone. He only made it stop. He protected us. He remembered everything." Titan's soft whine punctuated each phrase, a living confirmation of her testimony. The jurors leaned forward, unable to resist the pull of the story unfolding before them. The media, cameras rolling, captured every gesture, every expression, every subtle sound. This was a scene that would linger in public memory long after the trial ended. Rachel Parker reached for Ellie, smoothing her hair again, whispering encouragement. "You're doing so well, baby, just keep going." Ellie's big eyes met her mother, then shifted back to Titan. Her small fingers stroked his collar gently, communicating reassurance and gratitude. Titan responded with a soft sigh, leaning further into her touch, the sound echoing through the courtroom. It was a moment of unspoken understanding, trust, and acknowledgement. A bridge between innocence and experience, between child and dog. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the courtroom, but even he seemed affected by the scene. "Officer Harlan, is this behavior normal for Titan?" The handler shook his head. "No, Your Honor. He's trained to follow commands, to protect, to obey. But this is different. He's responding to her, recognizing something only she knows. He's remembering that night, the danger, the protection, and he's acknowledging it." The jurors absorbed the statement, some whispering quietly, others leaning forward in disbelief. Ellie's small hands rested firmly on Titan's head, and she whispered once more, "He was brave. He saved Mommy. He saved me, and he remembers it all." Titan leaned into her hand, a soft, approving rumble escaping him. The courtroom remained frozen, caught between disbelief and awe. Every adult present recognized the extraordinary truth. A 3-year-old child and a trained police dog had shared a memory, had validated trauma, and had created an undeniable bond that now dictated the narrative. And in that moment, the courtroom understood. The events of that night had not been ordinary, the actions of Titan had not been ordinary, and the courage of a 3-year-old child had created a moment that would echo through the proceedings, reshaping every expectation of truth, protection, and recognition. The tension did not dissipate. It intensified as everyone waited for the next revelation, the next 2 words that would stop the courtroom cold. The courtroom was suspended in a tension that felt almost sacred. Every eye was fixed on Ellie Parker, the tiny child kneeling on the witness stand, her small fingers resting firmly on Titan's massive head. The Belgian Malinois leaned into her touch, ears pricked, muscles tense but controlled, his low rumble echoing through the high ceilings like the pulse of the room. Officer Harlan, normally composed and unshakable, gripped the leash tightly, realizing that what he was witnessing was beyond any training, beyond any scenario he had ever prepared Titan for. Rachel Parker sat rigidly beside her daughter, hands trembling as she smoothed Ellie's hair. She had relived the terror of that night countless times, flashing lights, angry shouting, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. But now her daughter, 3 years old, was articulating the events with clarity and courage that left the courtroom spellbound. And Titan, trained for obedience and protection, was responding with instinctive acknowledgement, validating every word Ellie spoke. Ellie took a deep breath, eyes glistening with unshed tears, and leaned closer to Titan. She whispered words too soft for the room to hear at first. He knows." Titan's ears twitched, and a subtle rumble vibrated through his chest, confirming that he understood. The jurors leaned forward in their seats, straining to catch even a fragment of the child's whispered revelation. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled frantically, and the judge exhaled slowly, sensing that the moment about to unfold would change the courtroom forever. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, adjusted her notes, trying to regain professional composure. "Ellie, can you tell the court what Titan knows? What is he remembering?" The child's small gaze met hers briefly, then returned to the dog. Her lips trembled slightly, but her voice was deliberate. "He knows the man, the scary man. He tried to hurt Mommy. He would have hurt me too, but Titan, he stopped him." The words, so simple yet loaded with meaning, hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Titan's low whine punctuated each phrase, reverberating through the courtroom, as if validating her every claim. The jurors collectively gasped. The notion that a trained police dog had instinctively protected a toddler and her mother was extraordinary, but the way Titan responded, leaning into Ellie, rumbling, acknowledging her words, elevated the moment into something almost mystical. Officer Harlan exhaled, realizing that Titan's memory of the night, coupled with instinct and loyalty, was communicating in a language only Ellie could understand. It was an unspoken dialogue between child and dog, bridging fear, courage, and memory in a way no human could replicate. Rachel Parker's hands shook as she whispered encouragement, her voice thick with emotion. "It's okay, baby, just tell them everything." Ellie nodded slightly, her gaze unwavering. She inhaled deeply, preparing to deliver the revelation that had everyone in the courtroom leaning forward, hearts pounding. "Titan, he knew I was scared, he knew Mommy was scared, and he made sure we were safe. He remembered everything." Titan's ears pricked, his head lowering slightly, and a soft, approving whine escaped him. The subtle shift in his massive body confirmed the truth of her words. The judge, leaning forward, fingers interlocked, asked carefully, "Miss Parker, are you saying Titan acted on his instincts? That he understood the danger?" Ellie's lips pressed together for a moment, as if contemplating the enormity of her own words. Then, in a small but steady voice, she said, Yes, he knew, he remembered. He stopped the scary man. Every adult in the courtroom froze. Titan's low rumble deepened, vibrating through the room, a sound that carried a resonance of recognition, protection, and memory. Officer Harlan's grip on the leash tightened, though he did not issue a command. He realized that the dog's behavior was instinctive and profound, guided by a memory Ellie had validated. The jurors leaned forward, some whispering to neighbors, others simply staring in disbelief. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras rolling, capturing a scene that defied explanation. Ellie continued, recounting fragments of the night in her childlike, precise voice. The man shouted, he ran, he tried to grab Mommy, but Titan, he barked, he growled, he made it stop, he protected us. Titan's low rumble punctuated each sentence, his massive body leaning into her touch, reinforcing the child's testimony without words. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath collectively, absorbing the profound reality unfolding in front of them. Rachel Parker's chest tightened, tears flowing freely. She whispered softly to Ellie, "You're so brave, just keep going." Ellie nodded, eyes glistening, and leaned even closer to Titan, whispering the words that would stop the courtroom cold. "He saved us, and he remembers it all." Titan's massive head pressed gently into her hand, the low rumble now a sustained sound of acknowledgement and recognition. The room seemed to exhale, yet the tension only deepened, a palpable anticipation building for what would come next. Amanda Cross, trying to regain control, asked cautiously, "Ellie, can you tell the court how Titan stopped the man? What exactly happened?" Ellie's small hands tightened on the dog's collar, her voice soft but deliberate. "He stood in front of us. He didn't move, he growled. He barked. He kept the scary man away until Mommy was safe." The jurors leaned forward, whispers running through their minds. The idea that a 3-year-old and a police dog had effectively communicated and acted in the midst of danger was almost beyond comprehension. Officer Harlan exhaled slowly, eyes wide. Titan had been trained for protection, pursuit, and control, but never for memory validation. The dog's subtle movements, the rumble, the lean into Ellie's touch, all confirmed that what the child was saying was true. Every subtle gesture told a story that words alone could not convey. The courtroom, once a sterile arena of law and procedure, had transformed into a chamber of raw emotion, instinct, and memory. Ellie's small voice continued, recounting events with precision that left every adult in the room captivated. "He didn't bite. He didn't hurt anyone. He just made it stop. He made sure we were safe. He remembered what to do." Titan leaned further into her hand, a long, low whine escaping him, resonating like affirmation. The jurors, journalists, and attorneys all felt the weight of the moment. They were witnessing an extraordinary connection, a memory validated across species, and a bravery that transcended age. Rachel Parker, trembling, whispered again to Ellie, "You're incredible, baby, just tell them everything." Ellie nodded slightly, eyes locked on Titan. Her tiny voice dropped even lower, almost a secret. "He remembered the man. He knew the man was dangerous, and he protected us. He knew what to do." Titan's ears pricked, his massive frame leaning gently, rumbling softly. Every subtle movement reinforced the gravity of the words. The courtroom was silent again, but now it was a silence charged with awe, suspense, and a hint of disbelief. The judge leaned forward, hand on his chin, voice calm but layered with tension. "Ellie, are you saying the dog knew instinctively to protect you and your mother?" Ellie's tiny hands rested firmly on Titan's head. Her voice, though small, rang with certainty. "Yes," he remembered. "He knew, he protected us." Titan responded with a low, sustained whine, a sound that carried the weight of affirmation. The room was caught in a suspended moment, every heartbeat synchronized with the extraordinary bond unfolding before them. Every adult present realized that the events of that night, the actions of Titan, and the courage of Ellie had converged into a revelation that no one could ignore. A 3-year-old child had communicated trauma, validated memory, and guided instinct across species lines. The courtroom was no longer just a place of law. It had become a stage for courage, trust, and recognition that transcended all expectation. And as Ellie whispered her final words for this part of her testimony, "He saved us, and he remembers it all," Titan pressed his head gently into her small hands, the low rumble resonating as both acknowledgement and protection. The courtroom remained frozen, hearts pounding, breath held collectively, for the moment when the next truth would emerge, an even more profound revelation that would leave everyone stunned. The courtroom had descended into a rare, almost sacred stillness. Every eye was riveted on Ellie Parker, the tiny 3-year-old kneeling on the witness stand, fingers gently clutching Titan's collar. The Belgian Malinois, massive and disciplined, leaned into her touch, ears pricked, muscles coiled yet calm. The low, vibrating rumble from deep in his chest seemed to echo throughout the room, creating a tense undercurrent that everyone present could feel. Officer Harlan's normally stoic face betrayed awe and apprehension. He had trained Titan for countless high-risk scenarios, but he had never witnessed a K-9 respond to memory and recognition in such a profound, unspoken dialogue with a toddler. Rachel Parker's heart pounded in her chest. Months of fear, trauma, and sleepless nights had culminated in this one extraordinary moment. She watched her daughter, so small and fragile, display courage beyond her years, narrating events that had haunted her family and guiding Titan with a calm authority no adult could replicate. Every subtle movement, the tilt of Ellie's head, the firmness of her grip on Titan's massive collar, the soft whisper in her trembling voice, held the courtroom captive. Ellie leaned closer to Titan, as if preparing to share a secret only he could understand. Her voice was soft, almost imperceptible, and yet the dog's response was instantaneous. A deep, sustained rumble that vibrated against the floor and through every person in the room. Officer Harlan instinctively tightened his grip on the leash, though he did not issue a command. He realized that Titan was not responding to training or instinct alone. He was responding to memory, recognition, and trust. Ellie's lips trembled as she whispered words so soft that at first only Titan seemed to hear. Then slowly, she repeated them just loud enough for the courtroom to catch. "Bad man." The effect was instantaneous. Every head in the room turned, eyes widening in disbelief. Titan's low rumble escalated into a soft bark, deliberate and precise, as if confirming the danger Ellie had named. The courtroom seemed to inhale collectively, the tension tightening with each passing heartbeat. Jurors leaned forward, some gasping quietly. Reporters scribbled frantically, cameras clicking as if trying to capture not only the image but the magnitude of the revelation. Rachel Parker's hands trembled violently as she whispered, "Yes, yes, baby, that's it, just say it." Ellie's tiny fingers pressed firmly against Titan's head, her gaze unwavering. Her lips parted again, voice steady despite the quiver of fear and courage coursing through her body. "Bad man," she repeated, eyes locked on the dog. Titan responded immediately, a deep, prolonged whine vibrating from his massive chest, his body shifting slightly to position himself between Ellie and the courtroom, as if prepared to defend her once more. The judge, leaning forward, hand on his chin, spoke with controlled gravity. "Miss Parker, are you saying this is the man who frightened you and your mother that night?" Ellie nodded solemnly. Titan's low bark punctuated the confirmation, resonating like a drumbeat in the polished courtroom. Officer Harlan swallowed hard, realizing that the dog's behavior, so deliberate, so synchronized with Ellie's words, was validation beyond doubt. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, recovered her voice, though it trembled slightly. "Ellie, are you telling the court that this man was dangerous? That Titan protected you and your mother from him?" Ellie nodded again, clutching Titan's collar tightly. Her voice, small yet filled with undeniable clarity, whispered, "Yes, he's the bad man. Titan stopped him," he remembered. Titan's head pressed gently into her hand, a subtle yet powerful acknowledgement. The jurors collectively exhaled, a wave of tension and disbelief washing over the room. Ellie's tiny frame trembled, but she did not falter. She leaned even closer to Titan, whispering words that felt like they carried the weight of months of trauma and fear. "He's gone, but he was scary. Titan saved us." The dog's rumble deepened, his body shifting slightly as if reinforcing every word. Rachel Parker's hands shook uncontrollably, tears streaming freely, yet she remained silent, letting her daughter take the lead. The courtroom was suspended, caught between disbelief and awe. Every person present understood that the narrative they had prepared for months had been upended. The bravery of a 3-year-old and the instincts of a trained K-9 had created a story that could not be ignored, a truth that transcended hearsay or procedural expectation. Titan, massive and disciplined, leaned into Ellie's touch, eyes dark and intelligent, acknowledging not just her words but the memory they represented. Ellie's voice grew slightly firmer, the tremble replaced with a quiet, commanding authority. "Bad man," he tried, but Titan, he stopped him. "He saved Mommy. He saved me, he remembers." The jurors shifted uneasily, some with tears welling in their eyes. Officer Harlan's breath caught in his chest. He had never seen Titan act in such a deliberate, conscious manner in response to anything other than a direct command. But this was different. The child's words had unlocked something profound, a memory shared across species, validated by instinct, loyalty, and protective courage. Amanda Cross whispered to herself, trying to regain composure. This is extraordinary, impossible, but true." Marcus Reynolds, the defense attorney, leaned back in his chair, eyes wide. "The child of the dog, it's like they share the memory. She's telling the truth, he's confirming it." The judge, fingers interlocked, exhaled slowly, recognizing that the courtroom had shifted from a place of law into a stage for a truth that transcended normal understanding. Ellie leaned back slightly, still gripping Titan's massive collar, and whispered one last time, "Bad man, gone, we're safe." Titan responded with a soft, approving whine, his head lowering slightly but his gaze never leaving Ellie. The subtle gestures, ears pricked, muscles relaxed, rumble deepening, conveyed affirmation in a way that words alone could not capture. Every adult present felt it. The room was thick with awe, disbelief, and an almost sacred recognition of courage, protection, and truth. Rachel Parker's chest heaved. She whispered through tears, "That's it, baby, you did it. You told everyone, you saved us again." Ellie's lips curved slightly in a small, triumphant smile. The relief was palpable, yet the courtroom's tension did not dissipate. It had evolved into reverence for the extraordinary connection between the child and the dog, a bond forged in trauma, validated by memory, and expressed through instinct. Titan shifted slightly, positioning himself closer to Ellie, a silent sentinel reaffirming her bravery and the truth of her words. Officer Harlan's eyes widened. He had trained this dog for years to respond to commands and protocols, but what he was witnessing now went far beyond training. A living validation of memory, trauma, and courage communicated between a toddler and a K-9. The jurors, reporters, and attorneys all absorbed the magnitude of the moment. They were witnessing a truth that could not be ignored. The judge finally broke the silence, his voice calm but heavy with gravity. "The court acknowledges the testimony presented by Miss Parker and the demonstration of the dog's behavior as validation of her statements. This is extraordinary, and it will be recorded accordingly." The words fell into the room like a gavel striking, yet the spell was far from broken. Every adult present felt the weight of Ellie's courage, Titan's instinct, and the undeniable truth revealed in those two simple words, "Bad man." The room remained suspended, caught between disbelief and awe. Cameras clicked, reporters whispered, and the jurors exchanged glances that combined shock, empathy, and understanding. Titan's massive head rested gently against Ellie's hands, a final affirmation of protection, recognition, and memory. The courtroom had stopped cold, not just because of a testimony, but because a 3-year-old had delivered a truth so profound that it could not be ignored. And as Ellie whispered softly, still clutching Titan's collar, "We're safe, he remembers." The weight of months of fear and trauma lifted slightly. The courtroom exhaled collectively, but the intensity lingered, a reminder that courage, memory, and protection could manifest in the smallest, most extraordinary ways. The moment would be etched into everyone's mind forever. The day a 3-year-old and a police dog rewrote the narrative with 2 simple, world-stopping words. The courtroom remained still, but now the tension had shifted into something heavier. yet different, a reverent quiet, like the pause before a storm releases its weight. Every person present sat frozen, absorbing the extraordinary reality they had just witnessed. A 3-year-old child had spoken, and a police dog had validated her memory in ways no one had ever seen. Titan, massive and vigilant, rested his head gently on Ellie's tiny hands, the low rumble of his chest vibrating like a pulse in the room, a living confirmation of courage and truth. Officer Harlan, usually composed, felt a lump rise in his throat. He had trained dogs for years to perform under pressure, but this was beyond his experience. Rachel Parker's body shook as relief washed over her. She took Ellie into her lap, hugging her tightly, feeling the small tremor of fear that remained in her daughter's tiny frame. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You did it, baby. You told them. You kept us safe again." Ellie buried her face in her mother's shoulder, a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and triumph coursing through her. The rabbit, worn and beloved, pressed against her cheek, a silent witness to the courage that had guided her through this moment. Jurors, still absorbing the weight of the testimony, leaned back in their seats, some exchanging whispered words of awe. Every head turned to Titan, who had not moved since the final words left Ellie's lips. His ears remained pricked, eyes watchful, body tense but calm, ever the guardian. Officer Harlan released the leash slightly, exhaling slowly. He's never done anything like that," he murmured, almost to himself. "Not in training, not in simulations, not ever." He reacted instinctively. He remembered. Amanda Cross, the prosecutor, sat quietly for a moment, trying to regain her professional composure. Her hand rested on her notebook, pen paused mid-sentence. She looked at Ellie and then at Titan, realizing the truth of what had unfolded was undeniable. "Extraordinary," she whispered under her breath. The courtroom had witnessed a moment that transcended law, procedure, and expectation, a moment of courage, instinct, and truth. The judge cleared his throat, breaking the reverent silence. "The court acknowledges the testimony and the extraordinary demonstration of memory, instinct, and courage presented today. This will be recorded in the official proceedings. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck, a formal end to the proceedings, yet the room did not move immediately. It was as if everyone was caught between disbelief and awe, reluctant to leave a moment that had shifted their perception of bravery, protection, and truth. Outside the courtroom, the media storm erupted almost instantly. Reporters clamored for statements, cameras clicked, and news crews captured images of Ellie holding Titan's massive head in her tiny hands. The story was electric. 3-year-old stops court with 2 words, "Police dog confirms memory of danger." Social media lit up with video clips of the courtroom, comments pouring in from across the country. People were captivated, not just by the terror of the event Ellie had endured, but by the incredible bond she shared with Titan and the courage she had displayed. Rachel Parker clutched Ellie to her chest as reporters approached, microphones extended. She spoke first, voice trembling but clear. "Ellie is brave and Titan is extraordinary. What happened that night was terrifying, but my daughter's courage and this dog's loyalty saved us. That's all anyone needs to know." Journalists nodded, some scribbling furiously, others simply watching, mesmerized by the image of a tiny child and a massive K9 embodying bravery and protection. Officer Harlan knelt beside Titan, whispering softly to the dog, his voice full of awe and pride. "You did it, boy. You protected them just like I knew you would. But this is something else entirely. You remembered." Titan pressed his head into Harlan's hands briefly, then returned to Ellie as if completing a circle of protection and loyalty. The bond between child, mother, and dog had been solidified in the most extraordinary way possible, leaving no room for doubt in anyone's mind. The Parker family slowly exited the courtroom, walking down the polished marble steps, Ellie clutching her rabbit and Titan by her side. The media followed, yet Rachel Parker held her hand over Ellie's shoulder, keeping her shielded, yet letting the world witness the bravery of her daughter. Every passerby paused, cameras flashing, hearts moved by the surreal yet deeply human story unfolding before them. The image of a tiny girl and a massive dog had already begun to circulate, spreading like wildfire across social platforms and news outlets. Later, back at home, Ellie curled up on the couch, Titan lying protectively at her feet. Rachel sat beside her, holding her daughter's hand. "You were amazing today, baby," she whispered. "Everyone saw how brave you are. Everyone saw how Titan kept you safe." Ellie rested her head against her mother's shoulder, small fingers gently stroking Titan's fur. "He remembered, Mommy, he knew," she said softly. Rachel smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. "Yes, baby, he remembered, and you were incredible." The story quickly became a national sensation. Social media was flooded with messages of admiration, awe, and disbelief. News networks ran feature stories, highlighting the extraordinary bond between a 3-year-old and a trained K9, and the courage that had allowed Ellie to communicate trauma and memory in a way that left an entire courtroom stunned. The story was shared, reposted, and broadcast across platforms, capturing hearts across the country. Law enforcement agencies began referencing the event as a landmark demonstration of the power of trust, memory, and instinct between handler, dog, and civilians. Experts were interviewed, explaining the rare phenomenon of a K9 responding to trauma and memory in such a precise and instinctive way. Psychology and animal behavior specialists weighed in, emphasizing the unprecedented nature of a toddler guiding and validating a trained dog's instincts. For the Parker family, life slowly began to normalize, though the shadow of that terrifying night would never fully fade. Ellie had become a local hero, lauded for her bravery and calm, her testimony recognized as extraordinary. Titan continued his K9 duties, but the bond between him and Ellie had deepened in ways that training manuals could never capture. Every day, Ellie's small hand would reach out to Titan, and the dog would respond with protective instinct and loyalty, a living reminder of the courage and connection that had stopped a courtroom cold. The impact of the courtroom moment lingered. Jurors later described it as life-changing and unlike anything we've ever witnessed. And reporters continued to follow the story, sharing interviews with Rachel and Ellie that highlighted not only the terror of the night but the extraordinary bravery and loyalty displayed. The narrative of fear, protection, and courage resonated deeply with the public, a testament to the fact that sometimes the smallest among us can wield the greatest power, and the most unlikely heroes can validate the truth in ways that defy logic. In the quiet moments, Rachel would watch Ellie and Titan together, marveling at the way her daughter's tiny hand guided and reassured the massive dog. She understood, more profoundly than anyone, that the events of that night and the extraordinary courtroom testimony had forever changed the lives of everyone involved. Ellie had faced terror with courage beyond her years. Titan had acted with instinctive loyalty and recognition, and the world had witnessed the power of trust, bravery, and memory between child and dog. And as Ellie drifted to sleep, Titan curled around her protectively, the house quiet and safe, Rachel Parker whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. The nightmare of that night had been met with courage and instinct, and the story of a tiny girl and a heroic dog would continue to inspire awe, empathy, and wonder for years to come. The courtroom may have stopped cold, but the story of Ellie and Titan would never stop. Their bond, their bravery, and their extraordinary moment had left an indelible mark, not just on the law, but on every heart that witnessed it. The tiny child who spoke 2 words had changed everything, and the massive dog who understood those words had reminded the world that courage, loyalty, and memory can manifest in the most unexpected forms.